Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Growth Capital Podcast. I am your host, Justin Dixon, and today we've got Ezra Goldman on the podcast. He is the co-founder and CEO of Upshift. Upshift is redefining car subscription for the autonomous era. Subscribe to a car that drives you around, runs your errands, and valet parks itself all in one. So it is a very interesting podcast episode. We talk a lot about autonomous vehicles, where they are now and where they're going. He is essentially trying to create an ability for somebody living in a city and eventually in a rural area to not have to own a car, but to essentially have the ability to call a car, have it to kind of show up at your house when you need it, and then drive itself away when you're done with it. So I think you'll really get a lot out of this episode. So let's get Ezra on the pod. Interested in hearing conversations with private equity leaders, CEOs of private equity-backed companies, and startup entrepreneurs where they share their stories about their career journeys, starting, investing in, and scaling successful businesses, and the important role that having the right talent plays in building a successful business, then you are in the right place. Welcome back to another episode of the Growth Capital Podcast. Here's your host, Justin Dixon. All right, Ezra, good to see you, man. Thanks for being a guest on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Justin.
Awesome. Well, let's jump right in. Give the listeners and watchers of this a little bit of an overview of who you are, where you are, and what you're up to right now.
Yeah, so I'm Ezra. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Upshift, and we are reinventing car ownership for the autonomous era. So this is not robotaxi. This is really looking at what happens to car sales and the dealership and the rental car and the car share space once you have a personal autonomous vehicle that you can put into any one of those platforms and the car can just come to you. And as you look at what we have right now, most cars sit idle 95% of the time, wasting about $9 trillion in idle inventory, collecting parking tickets just and traffic damages while they're street parked in cities and just wasting a ton of time and money for people. And then you have the what I call blockbuster for cars problem, which is dealers, rental car companies, car share operators. They all have business models that rely on you coming to them to access a car or purchase a car. And as we move towards autonomy, not just for robotaxis, but also in personal autonomous vehicles that are coming out in the next few years, the car will come to you, and it's not going to make sense to have it street parked electric autonomous vehicle that just sits there 95% of the time. You're just going to pay for a car that shows up on your door whenever you need it and goes away when you don't, and someone else will manage the parking, the cleaning, the charging, and all of that. And so it becomes more like a Netflix for cars or a car as a service.
And so this would be something where if I had a self-driving vehicle and I loaded it up onto your platform and I live in Austin, but let's say you live a couple miles away and you're like, cool, I need a car and I'm the one that's up for available. It would be parked in my driveway. And then I get an alert saying, hey, Ezra needs my car and whatever. And then it just drives to you, picks you up, does the things that you need to do. And then it comes back to me as the sole owner. Or are you thinking more of this would be organizations would own fleets of vehicles that they would have scattered throughout a geography, and the same thing would happen, like they would get called by a user, or both?
Yeah, it's not peer-to-peer. So we're focused on current operators like dealerships, rental car, and car share operators who would own and operate these fleets of unified identical vehicles that they could integrate the technology stack into, and we can make a very efficient model out of. And then you would subscribe or pay for a monthly membership based on how much you drive. So think of it like maybe a 6,000 mile a year lease, a 9,000 mile a year lease, 3,000 mile a year lease, even if you're in, a dense urban market. And you would pay for time and miles based on how much you drive. And then that car would just show up when you need it and go away when you don't. And the reason for that is because you can get to a much more efficient model that way, because you can streamline all the vehicles, streamline all the hardware and software, streamline the charging and operations and cleaning when all the cars are identical and interchangeable, and they're all managed by a centralized fleet operator, as opposed to a peer-to-peer model, which tends to be much more challenging to pull off in terms of efficiency and making for a really coherent, positive unit economics, and can lead to a lot of issues for the owner, right? So let's say you want your car back suddenly, but it's across town. Well, now I have to get you a different car, and now you're pissed off because your car is red and this one is blue or whatever. I mean, it just ends up being a lot messier to manage than to just say, look, you just pay $500 a month and you get a car when you need it, and you can have whatever car you want as long as it's the exact one we have on the platform. And then you
Got
can
it.
also
So
have your car everywhere, right? So if you're in Austin, you're in San Francisco, you're in New York, you get the same personalized vehicle experience no matter where you are.
so that answers my question. This would not be I have a car and you just manage it and I get the same
Correct.
exact vehicle. It's similar to a rental vehicle. The only difference is I don't go to the rental car company. The car comes to wherever I am, essentially.
It's more of a subscription. So right now we offer 4, 8, or 12 days per month of access time. You always get the same make, model, trim. And as we scale up, we think we can move that to an hourly rate structure as the cost of delivery comes down with a fully autonomous stack. But yes, essentially it would be like a virtualized car in your pocket where anywhere you go, your car is there ready and waiting for you. And eventually you can move towards API integration to personalize that experience everywhere you go. If you own the car and you go on a trip to New York, well, now you got to go rent a car at Hertz. But this would be more like, now I just have my phone as my car, and whenever I want it, I hit a button and poof, it shows up, and it doesn't really matter which city I'm in. I always get the same car and experience, and it's just at my doorstep, and I never have to deal with parking, cleaning, charging, insurance, maintenance, any of that. And I'm not locked into long-term financing, and I'm just paying based on how much I use, like a usage-based insurance kind of program.
Interesting. So how did you come up with the idea, and where are you in the evolution of the business? Because obviously this is going to grow with more autonomous vehicles coming online.
Yeah, so I've been working in the shared mobility space since co-founding a Dockless Bike Share in 1999, working on a shared electric scooter at MIT Media Lab in 2006. And I've been working on the future of car ownership for the autonomous era since around 2008, 2011, depending on how you want to count. And we launched the model we have right now around 2018, I guess, if you want to factor in the subscription model. We've been doing it as bicycle courier delivery service here in San Francisco. So you subscribe to 4, 8, or 12 days per month of access. You get 250 to 750 miles of access. Days and miles roll over. You can pay for additional ones as needed. So you have that flexibility. And then we deliver the car to you by bicycle courier. So we just fold the seats down in the back, put the bike in, drive it a mile or two to your house, park it. There's telematics in the member app experience as well as the delivery app experience, so that you don't have to have any keys involved in the mix. And you just walk up to the car, unlock it, and drive it all via app whenever you're ready. So you don't have to be standing there waiting when it shows up like an Uber. You just have it parked somewhere within a couple blocks, and then whenever you're ready to go, you walk out and drive it for a few hours or a few days. And then when you're done, you just park and walk away. Now, what we're moving towards now is a tele-operated model where the car actually gets delivered to you by remote control, and then eventually towards a fully autonomous model where the car would show up to you fully autonomously, and then obviously be able to drive you around and run your errands and things like that. Now, I expect we could actually get to that fully autonomous model in the premium segment early next year, and obviously that cost and scale will come down over time as more and more personally autonomous vehicles come online.
And so there are vehicles right now that are on the market that or maybe are soon to be on the market that can be delivered autonomously at the moment. Is that right? I'm not up on the autonomous driving as much as some other people, and obviously you are. So is that on the market now or very close to?
Very close. So remote driving is here. So there are a number of operators who are doing remote driving. You may have heard about similar types of technology with the Waymo Senate hearings that got a lot of press recently. But that's remote assistance, which is essentially just somebody sending commands saying, hey, back up, or, that fire truck is not heading to a fire. You don't have to move aside. Like, it's not actually one-to-one human driven. But there are other companies that are doing one-to-one human driving, more like a drone. And there's about half dozen different companies out there who have been spending the last 5-6 years perfecting that technology. And that technology is now coming to market as something that can scale. So that's a technology that we're using right now to essentially move from bicycle courier, which is like the V1 prototype, to a delivery driver, which is the V2 prototype, which essentially gets us to a more valet experience where it can instantly show up and instantly go away, and drives a lot of efficiency, enables us to scale to lower density and larger radius service areas. And then the fully autonomous, that's coming out later this year, early next year, depending on which market you're talking about. And I don't want to disclose exactly the market rollout plans because it's not my confidential information to share on a public podcast, but it will be coming out in the next, I'd say, 6 to 12 months. This will be in the luxury vehicle segment. So think Lucid Air type price point. And then as we move down to 2, 3, 5 years out, expect to see basically every automaker rolling out some variant on this, on an initial luxury car in their class They're not going to roll it out on every single make, model, and trim, but it'll first come out in a Mercedes S-Class, for example, these high-end trims, and then it'll eventually percolate down to the mass market over a number of years. So these will be different kinds of vehicles that'll actually be designed for you and I to just have one parked in our driveway and be able to drive it anywhere. Now, that's not to say that it'll be fully autonomous in all contexts, but it'll be fully autonomous in certain contexts. So, for example, maybe in downtown San Francisco, it'll be autonomous, but then once you get on the highway, it'll have some sort of semi-automated experience that'll be kind of like a souped-up cruise control. You could think of it that way. And then as you get out into somewhere very remote hinterland, you'd be driving it like a regular car with the kind of driving experience you might have on most cars today. We might eventually get to some level 5 autonomy, but I think that's still decades away. But in terms of what we're trying to focus on, it's really just using that autonomy primarily to just optimize the distribution of the vehicle to make it really easy to share the fleet with really strong positive unit economics for the operator and very flexible, efficient, and convenient service experience for the end user. And to the extent that they get autonomy in their actual experience of using the car, I think it's kind of gravy. Like what we're really focused on is more just moving the car from member to member in the most efficient manner, which helps us to drive down the cost of operations and create a much better user experience and much more predictable and reliable experience.
So then in that world, do you see car dealerships becoming more car, like they essentially have the fleet and then we are the ones that are paying subscriptions to use that class of vehicle, et cetera, as opposed to going to a dealership and buying a vehicle that we have sit in our garage or our driveway?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you would just go online or in an app and you would subscribe to a membership plan that meets your needs, and then it would just show up when you need it, go away when you don't. There's not really any reason to go to the dealer for any particular reason. And then that would be integrated into a variety of other services, at least in dense urban metros, right? So you have bike share and ride share and robotaxi and transit and all these things. And eventually you get to the point where you're just paying, a few $100 to $1,000 maybe, and you're getting a package that essentially works for your lifestyle, right? You get a bus pass and a certain amount of access to bike share and scooter share and a certain amount of access to a car. And that all gets wrapped up into, one mobility as a service bundle. And we're just focused on really the software orchestration layer, the delivery and dispatch, the subscription management, account management layer for the car component of that. And then we're integrating third-party hardware and working with fleet operators who want to scale this up.
Love it. And then I guess, so you've been doing this or thinking of this for a long time. So now that you've kind of gotten to scale and maybe even the industry is caught up from a mass market perspective or about to catch up, where do you see your platform going? You're focusing on going out and finding these fleet operators that are going to have these autonomous vehicles and putting your software into the vehicle and also the app integration that a consumer would use to log in. Is that kind of where the next steps are for you?
Yeah, so we've really focused on the software layer. So we have the member app experience to manage your subscription, book your car, locate, unlock, and drive it keylessly, track your consumption. All of that is done through the member app, both web and mobile. And then we have a delivery driver app. This is really to manage the logistics side of the system. So think cleaning, damage reporting, fuel, mileage, parking location and parking restrictions, where the car needs to be picked up and delivered and at what time, and virtual keys associated with all that. And then taking all those data, pulling it into our backend system, which is a dispatch platform to track every single booking and exactly like the mileage and toll and gas billing. And then also all the damage reporting photos. So you can go back over and see exactly when a new damage occurred. You can also track exactly who cleaned which car and what exactly they cleaned and, what time they did it. And, so we have all these kinds of data that we can then leverage. And then we have the telematics backend, which is not our platform, but it's a third-party platform that has all the data around driving behavior, speed, acceleration, engine fault codes, and diagnostics. So we can then leverage all of those data to build predictive analytics and AI-powered dispatch solution. And then we have a account management backend as well. So this is to manage your accounts of days and miles, credits, making sure that that's all tracking and rolling over and being charged appropriately, member vetting, for driver checks. So we've basically done all of that software layer, and then we're stitching together third-party hardware vendors because we're not a hardware company. So we're stitching together the telematics suite from third-party vendors that's all they do. That's their focus. And now we're stitching in the tele operations layer which is the remote driving. So they have cameras that they install on all sides of the vehicle. They tap into the drive-by-wire system and put redundant modem system in place to send the data over, 4G and 5G network. And then they have drive stations that enable you to actually drive the car via remote control. And then we're partnering with other remote driving companies who actually do the remote driving themselves. So we're essentially just stitching together all these pieces. And then, of course, there's the insurance component, which is, complex and multifaceted across all these different players that all need their own insurance. So we're essentially just making sure that all of these pieces are organized in a coherent fashion. And the piece that we're focused on is really just that software layer and the integration and orchestration of all the other layers.
And so as a company yourself, like where's the company now? Obviously you've been in business for a while. You're based, I'm guessing, in San Francisco where you live. Yep. Is it you and a couple of co-founders, or do you have a big team? Like what does that kind of look like? And maybe on the back of that, how is kind of AI helping you to scale faster than maybe you could have done or would have done a few years ago?
Yeah, no, the AI has definitely really helped a lot. I mean, we're a small and mighty team of folks who all have a decade plus experience in car subscription, car sharing, autonomous rideshare, autonomous or teleoperated car sharing, flying cars, pretty much anything that touches this industry. Everybody's got some decade plus experience in, and we're bringing all of those experiences to bear so that we can kind of, on the one hand, hybridize the things that work, and on the other hand, avoid the things that don't, that we've seen other people fail at, and both big and small. And so that's been super helpful. On the AI side, yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm using AI like half of my day these days, like just figuring out strategy, figuring out how to build partnerships with other companies. I mean, I'm just using it almost like a strategic advisor slash co-founder or something. I think that's mainly how I personally use it, but we are also integrating it now into the dispatch system. So the thing that we found is really the hardest to scale with this, and the most complex piece is really, let's say you have 100 cars in a given market. So we have 100 cars in Austin. Well, we need to know which car is going to go where, when, and even if all the cars are exactly the same make, model, and trim, they're never all going to be identical. There's going to be some that are damaged, some that are dirty, some that need a charge, some that were supposed to come back at 4 and now it's 6 p.m. and they're still like stuck in traffic, right? So there's always going to be things that are dynamically occurring in that ecosystem. And even though for the most part, people are booking 24 hours or more in advance right now, as we move towards tele operations and then full AV, we expect that we'll be able to optimize around shorter and shorter booking delivery windows, right? So right now we push people into a 24-hour plus booking period, and we charge a premium for same-day delivery, mainly because it's much harder to execute. It's much more complicated. But as you move towards a fully autonomous stack with an AI-powered dispatch system, well, now you don't have to have a human try to figure out, oh, this new thing just happened dynamically. I got to redo the whole schedule to accommodate this new thing that just happened. The AI can do that in seconds, and the car can be rerouted in seconds as well, right? You might have a car that was like about to go to one destination, suddenly something changed, and now that car gets rerouted to a different destination, and a different car gets routed to the first destination because that person had more flexibility. It doesn't need to get there for another hour or two, but this other thing urgently came up. So there's all of this kind of dynamic aspect of it that AI can enable and really scale that you can't do without. And so that's probably the most exciting application that we're looking at with AI.
Yeah, it's interesting. As you're talking about the overages and the logistics, I remember I lived in Philadelphia and I sold my car. This is back in probably 2011 or so, and maybe 2012. And Zipcar was like a big thing, that just had come out, and obviously not autonomous, but you were very much you could if cars were available, you could select it that day, that hour, or whatever, but you had a very fine timeline because you knew that somebody else was going to come pick that vehicle up at a specific location or whatever. So obviously yours is different but similar in the sense of if there are overages, your schedule gets all messed up, and then it's a trickle down effect. Obviously AI is probably much faster than a human on being able to make those course corrections than you or I just sitting there being like, oh gosh, what do we do now? We have one car that's gone and we need two cars and all that.
Yeah, well, and this is obviously this solves a consumer problem of like the car shows up when you need it, goes when you don't. It's a great consumer solution. But what I think is a little less obvious is the optimization for the for the operator. And so what you pointed to is really the key tension in any car share model, right? And so if I'm Zipcar, first of all, I have to have cars available near you when you want one. And so what that typically means is I got to have cars everywhere, 2 to 5 cars in parking lots in 100 locations across the city. And what you care about is not, does Zipcar have 1,000 cars in Philadelphia? What you care about is, does it have one that's within 2 or 3 blocks of my house at 4 o'clock when I need it? And if they don't, then you don't really care that they have another car that's like halfway across town, because that's, now I got to Uber to it and whatever. I might as well just Uber to where I'm going at that point. So that's really the key friction point. And the other reason why that's even worse is that those 5 cars, let's say, that are within walking distance of your particular house, they're all specific assets booked at specific times and places. And they're, first of all, they're going to have like 30 makes and models, which is another challenge. But leaving that aside, let's say somebody books the car from 8 to 10, and somebody else books the car from 2 to 4. Well, now there's this weird like window in between from like 10 to 2. And if that happens to not work for you, well, too bad. That car is basically dead to the world for like 4 hours out of the day. And that really screws up their utilization, which makes it really hard to get profitable unit economics. And it's very hard to swap. So for example, let's say you had booked it for 10 to 12, but the guy who was supposed to be back at 10, now he's stuck in traffic, he's running late, his meeting went over, whatever. Now he's coming back at 10:30. Well, that screwed you up, and now you got to call customer support, and like they're telling you that the closest car is like 2 miles away, and it just totally trashes the whole model. And then the other problem, whereas if all the cars are centrally stored and dispatched, they're all identical and they just come to you, it's like you don't even care which car. You're not picking a specific model. You're just saying, does the operator have any availability of a vehicle from this window of time that I need it? And they say, yeah, whatever, we'll pull it from wherever it happens to need to come from. And we're going to pull the one that's clean, charged, and ready to go and not too far away at that time you need it. And that enables them to stack the bookings efficiently. And as things dynamically change throughout the day, throughout the week, they can keep on tweaking and optimizing that model to really, fill the utilization on those vehicles in the most efficient manner. And so that's what we enable, is to help them to build this super efficiency into the model. And as you probably are aware, as we move towards electrification, none of these shared vehicle models have managed to figure out how to do that. They've all fallen apart because people don't remember to plug them in. If you book for next Tuesday at 10 a.m., how do you know that when you show up, the car is actually going to be charged? It's impossible to know. If there is a charging issue, now I got to send an ops guy out there just to plug the car in. There's just so many challenges. If you're doing a free floating model, that's even more of a mess. And peer-to-peer is well, now I'm just totally relying on the end user who owns the car. I have no idea what they do. And then you look at autonomous and you say, well, none of these services have a clue how to do dispatch. They're all assuming that the cars are just, you're booking a specific asset in a specific location. They have no insight into cars are moving around all the time, and it's got to go from this place to that place, and what's the most efficient way to optimize that. That's not something that any of these vendors have any experience with. And so that's really where we come in, is that the cars will all be centrally stored, they'll be centrally charged, they'll be moving around dynamically to match demand. Same issue with peer-to-peer, right? You would have the same problems, right? Where you want your car at a certain time, and now suddenly it's out, it's running late, it came back dirty or damaged, and now I'm supposed to go out on my date or my business meeting, and there's all this junk in the back and dog hair and what the hell, and now I'm calling support. It's just a mess waiting to happen. And so that's why it makes a lot more sense to just say, we're just going to have a bunch of cars that are identical, and you have a fleet operator, and we build the software layer to optimize that whole system.
No, it makes a lot of sense. I wanted to go back to something you said about the AI thing, because I think it's interesting, because when I talk about AI and when I talk to founders about AI, a lot of them, default to, or most people default to oh, it's help me write a better sales email or marketing email or marketing campaign. And I think for founders of solo founders or small business owners that maybe don't have a board or, other people that they can bounce strategic ideas off of, I wanted to kind of dig in a little bit on how you're using it as more of a strategic advisor of, hey, I'm trying to break into this customer, this industry. What do you think? And maybe talk a little about how you actually use it, because I think it's interesting that most people are using it more as a better email writer versus I need to sit down and solve or think more deeply about this problem without going to another human who may have their own biases and all these other things. So
Yeah,
talk more about it if you wouldn't mind.
it can be both. I mean, even drafting emails, like there's strategy involved in like, who am I writing at this company and how am I addressing them? And what is it that, you can copy paste their LinkedIn profile. You can have it go search for like anything they've publicly written about how they're thinking about the future and how you might tie in and their strategy, and try to really personalize those, especially for like B2B sales. It's super helpful for that, to try to get a better sense of like what exactly is the hook for this particular company. I just used it this morning to, as I was trying to figure out, I was like, okay, I got this like corporation and I think they're doing something around teleoperations because that's kind of in their wheelhouse. They're a tier one, but I don't really know exactly what they're doing. Can you help me figure out like anything they've written about this publicly about what they're doing, and then help me figure out what's a partnership or a pilot we could do together that would be like in line with what they're trying to do, what this particular person within the company has been talking about and doing, and what they're, and then help me to draft something that's going to be really, so it's not just about the copy, it's about like, how do you actually build a strategy around it. I was using it for another partner where I was like, all right, who I've been doing this, but it's not really working. What do I do? Can you go like, if you're on Gemini, I can like read your last email threads and figure out exactly all the correspondence you've had with different people. And then it was like, oh, well, you should bring in like these other people into the thread and you should write the email like this. And it's not just about like kind of wordsmithing the specific email so much as like also figuring out like, who am I writing to and why am I writing them? And what is it that's going to change this? The other thing I've done is like, I'm working now on trying to figure out how do we use SEO to drive growth. And so we're seeing ChatGPT start to like drive inbound to our website, but we haven't really done any optimization around that. So now I'm trying to figure out, okay, how could we actually do AI SEO, which I think is a very nascent field that I personally don't have a lot of expertise in, but I'm trying to learn about that because I think that's a way to drive growth. Another thing we've done is like pricing. So the pricing on the website may look fairly simple. It's like 4, 8, or 12 days for like $400, $600, $800 a month, essentially, with insurance and delivery all included. That looks kind of simple. It's like constantly evolving. There's constantly new tweaks, like what exactly is included in those plans, how many miles, how many days is delivery included, not included? Do you offer like a stripped down version and then let people kind of add stuff in later? There's a million different ways that you could offer this kind of subscription offering that's like a car as a service. And believe me, we've tested hundreds of them. And what's on there now might not be the same in 3 months, like as we keep on evolving and iterating and looking at data, because when you change that pricing structure, you attract new customers and then they use the service in a different way. And then you're like, ooh, did that work or did that not work? Do we need to put in new policy guardrails to make sure that they don't abuse this edge case that we hadn't anticipated? Do we let those edge cases slide because it's just too much friction to throw it in to try to put the guardrail in, and then you just kill 80% of your users to solve for a 10% problem? There's all these kinds of things. And what I've used AI for is, just the other day, as I was getting to those plans that are currently on the website, I was like really kind of tearing my hair out trying to figure out how do I simplify that service offering. And I was like, there's so many ways I could do this. I'm really struggling to really, I've spent years, like I'm probably the world's leading expert on how to do this, but like I still am struggling on it. And I was like, let me give you all of my data. I'm going to give you all of my sign up data where people can, because we had these like unbundled plans where people could choose like days, miles, delivery, no delivery, weekend, midweek only. And I was like, here's all my data on people who have come through the funnel but fallen off, people who have signed up and paid for a certain period of time on certain plans. And for me to sit there and actually analyze all that and try to figure out, okay, what are the most popular plans? What kind of configurations really seem to work? Which ones are stickiest? Which ones tend to attract what kind of user? I was like, oh my God, it's impossible. But I was just able to just shove all that data in and be like, figure it out. And then come back in like a couple minutes. And then it was like, I think you should do this. And then kind of basically go back and forth with it and be like, well, we tried this, but that didn't work. We tried this, but that seemed to work. And basically just go back and forth with it for like, an hour or two until I got to the point where it's like, okay, I think let's try this iteration on the model and run that for a few months and see how people respond to that, and then go back and maybe test it again, right? And so you take those data and then shove those data into the system, and you're constantly kind of going back and forth in a way where if I were just working with like another teammate, it would just be two people like hammering their heads against this. Whereas with AI, it can be like, here's the actual data. it's extremely complicated for me to figure out what to do with these data, but you could actually use this.
And to your point, you can ask ChatGPT, like, based on the data, like, what do you recommend? But then also you can start to play with it, but it's still knowing all the data that you've fed it, because it can recall and go back and decipher. And I was just looking at the pricing on the website, because right now the occasional driver is like $399 a month. Do you see that as we get to more 1, 2, 3 years down the road? Do you see this becoming more inexpensive, more expensive for the average user, if they're just like, I'm trying to get to the office 2 days a week or something like that?
Yep.
Like, I'm just curious, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no. So right now, our limitations are really economies of scale, and the insurance costs are fairly expensive for a custom insurance product. The delivery cost is fairly expensive with a person on a bike. You got to pay them $25-$30 an hour in San Francisco, and so that's not cheap, right? Now, as we move towards tele operations, I think we can bring down the cost of the delivery, but of course the insurance is not cheap for remote driving, right? So it probably ends up being a bit of a wash, but you can deliver much faster and much more efficiently and change the way that the model works, in the sense that we could be delivering cars across the country from one central location, as opposed to having to stand up operations in 10 different markets. And so that obviously made it much more efficient. And then as you move towards full autonomy, well, now I have a different problem, which is that I've got, initially, at least over the next few years, you're probably looking at these, cars that are going to be like 6 figures in cost. And so for you might be able to go in theory and just go buy one, but probably only if you're very, very wealthy, because they're just going to be extremely expensive. And as we move, so essentially we're making that into like a fractional lease that brings it down to a price point that's more democratized. The early personal autonomous vehicles will be very high end and expensive. It'd be kind of like, think about like a Tesla Roadster when it first came out, right? Like it was cool and there's lots of press, but not many people could really afford one. And then over time you got down to like a Model 3 that was like, $30,000-$40,000 that was more accessible to more people. I think it'll be the same thing with personal autonomous vehicles. First, you're going to have like this 6-figure car that only a few people can afford. And what we do is we make that more democratically accessible by saying, look, we're not just trying to make a Corolla that's like, a little more convenient. We're actually trying to bring you this extremely cool new vehicle that has never existed before, that is wildly out of reach for you. And, maybe it won't be like cheap, like a rental car, but it'll be affordable, like a modest lease. And then as we move towards the eventual future, which, might be 10 years or something from now, it will eventually come down in price where you'll be able to get a, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 personal autonomous vehicle that you could actually have something that is very, very affordable and very convenient. But that's probably, we're talking 5-10 years from now, maybe longer.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the long range. So I would say it's a bit of it'll start high and come down. If you look at Uber, you look at Tesla, Waymo, I mean, it's sort of a similar strategy across all of them, is that it starts high and becomes cheaper over time.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. As we wind things down here, we're recording this in early March 2026. If we jumped on a podcast a year from now, like, what's like 1 or 2 things that you're trying to achieve, in the business to, make the next 12 months, success?
Yeah, the next 12 months are huge. So we're looking to add teleoperations, integrate AI, integrate with dealerships and fleet operators, like rental car and car share operators, and then move towards full autonomy. So we're planning to do all of those things in the next 12 months, as well as ramp up the growth. So we've got a pretty huge growth map over the next 12 months. What we've been doing so far is really just building all the software stack, testing the business model and pricing model to get it to this very simple model that you see there right now, and making sure that business model is actually viable with unit economics today. And so even if full AV doesn't come for a decade, or it comes, but it's just so expensive that it's really just like a pilot or beta kind of thing and low volume, we can still keep doing what we're doing right now, even with a guy on a bike, and scale that up. And that's profitable and viable right now. And we actually have some fleet operators who are like, yeah, all this AV stuff, this is like 20 years from now. I just want to be able to like sell a fractional subscription and somebody comes and picks it up and we don't even do delivery, right? So we're seeing kind of everything. And then we have other vendors who are like, I don't care about anything unless there's a fully autonomous car on it, because that's what I'm here for. I'm like the R&D department of like some big corporate, and like we don't even care if we lose money on it. We're just trying to capture the data, and if we could get a few cars and do something crazy and new, right? And so we have kind of everything in between. And so our model actually enables us to cover that wide range using the same software stack and the same general business model. Obviously, it'd be slightly different in pricing and such, but the same general logic across all of those. And I think it'll be a bit of a blended approach over the next few years as we transition from the current reality to that future reality. And my expectation is that once you get to that really true, fully autonomous car, this is no longer just, people in cities who don't have parking, who really just need a car for like weekend leisure, hiking, surfing, skiing, and golf, and taking your dog for a walk on the weekend. And then people who have like a part-time commute. There's a market for that. There's like half of all cars in cities are driven like 6,000 miles a year, and only get driven a couple days a week. So that's like the initial beachhead. But as we move towards teleops, that enables us to scale to lower density markets where we start saying, okay, well, we could go to the suburbs and capture second and third car replacement, where I got that other car that I don't use all the time. Boom, suddenly now that's a replacement. And then as you move towards a fully autonomous stack, you start to say, okay, well, even if I drive the car every day, I only drive it like an hour a day. And so what's it doing the other 23 hours? And it's like, well, it'd be great if I could get it used 23 hours. Well, what if I could get it used even 5 or 10 hours? Even that would be a massive improvement over what we're doing right now. And honestly, that's probably enough to make a viable business out of it, and vastly more efficient than pretty much any other model, because you're really only selling the exact time that you need on the car, which enables us to offer you a lower price point and give you really just the time and miles that you need.
Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense. And I'm excited because, like I said, I used Zipcar and I liked it. And then, we moved to the burbs, and then it was like, okay, well, we need, an actual vehicle. But to your point, it doesn't get like, I drive to the gym, it's a mile away, right? And I, some days I walk, some days I drive, but then, I drive it maybe twice a week, 3 times a week for a few hours, and it just sits in my garage. There's definitely an opportunity. It's just a matter of getting people used to the idea of not being able to walk outside and jump into their car. They've got to plan a little bit. So even if it is, an hour, you still have to say, oh, I got to go to the grocery store. I can't go right now. I got to see if I can get a car, kind of thing. So that's
and I think right now it's like 1 day notice is more or less what most people are giving, 1 day or more. Which works for like, I want to go hiking on Saturday, and it works for like, I need to get to the office on Tuesday. It's a little less optimal for like, oh, I forgot eggs, I got to run to the store. That kind of stuff, people tend to just bundle onto like another use case. Like they'll just swing by the grocery on the way home. But of course, those more like spontaneous things, I think those are really optimized better with like an Uber or a bike share or something like that, where it's like, I just got to do a dash to the gym or the store. It's like, well, there's other ways you could do that. The other I'll say is that as we move towards teleops, we could push that down to like an hour or even less. Like maybe you could get like the actual time to bring it to you is probably like 15 minutes. So it's really just a question, how long does it take us is the driver busy doing something else when you ask for the car? And then it might be another 5 or 10 minutes until they wrap up that and can jump in your delivery. So, but I think we could realistically get that to like 15, 20 minutes with a teledriver, and we could promise an hour and execute on like 20 minutes. And then with AV, I think you probably could be even faster than that potentially, because you're not even relying on the driver. And so that enables you to get down to 15 minutes or something. And, to be perfectly honest, in my experience, if you can get somebody a car in 15, 20 minutes, you're basically already magic at that point. I mean, you really only need a car in like 5 minutes for an Uber kind of experience, which is more like, I just got out of the bar, I'm standing here on the side of the road and it's raining, like where the hell is my car? But that's a very different use case than what we're serving. We're serving for more like trips of an hour or longer, which is like an errand, going to the office, going for a walk on the beach, like these kind of like longer use cases. And the longer that use case, the more you tend to plan, right? If you're going to be gone for a week, you don't typically like roll out of bed and be like, I'm going on a road trip today. Like the longer that trip is, there's a bit of a correlation between how much in advance you kind of know what you're doing versus like just a 5-minute ride across town, which of course then you need it pretty much instantly, which is a totally different service.
Love it. Ezra, man, this has been a lot of fun. Definitely could talk about this for a lot longer, but I want to wrap this up the same way I do every episode with a three-pack of questions. So first question, what is a book or podcast that you would recommend to the audience?
Yeah, so there's a couple of books that are really formational for me. So Image of the City by Kevin Lynch. This is really an urban design gospel of like how cities are built and designed. There's also Livable Streets by Donald Appleyard, which is coming out with a new version from his son, Bruce Appleyard. I recommend you check that out. Really about what does it mean to build a livable street in a city, so not just a way to efficiently move you from A to B, but actually create a space or a living room for you to engage with. I studied urban design for my master's program, and those are the key books. On the podcast side, the ones I've been listening to are Driverless Digest, which is Harry Campbell's podcast with the Rideshare Guide, aka, and he does a lot of interviews with people on the autonomous space. A great one just came out with Missy Cummings on the teleoperations. And there's another one called the Shift Podcast that's more auto tech writ large. It's anything cars, electric vehicles. And then there's War on Cars. This is kind of a little bit more in line with the two books that I shared around how cars are not really so great from an urban design standpoint. They sit there and waste space and resources and clog up and cause congestion and pollution and all the rest. And, of course, they're great for getting you from A to B, but are there other ways that we could design our cities to decrease your reliance on them by creating things that are really, dense and walkable and bikeable and easy to access? And what new mobility solutions can we create that reduce dependence on cars? So those are some of the things that I've been listening to and have read in the past.
Awesome. Love it. Second question here. What is your favorite thing to do outside of work?
Hike. So I started this company not because I don't even really like cars, but really because I grew up in nature and I could just open the door and play in the woods all afternoon. And that just gave me a great sense of peace of mind and connection to the natural world. And since I left home at 18, I've just been living in cities all around the world. I lived in Copenhagen and Boston and Portland and now in San Francisco Bay Area. And everywhere I go, it's kind of the same. It's like the nature is like out there. It's like an hour away somewhere. And like if you don't have a car, you can't get to it. And that was always my sort of rough patch. Like I don't really need a car to like get to the office or get to the grocery store. I can just bike there or ride transit. Like that's not my pain point. It's more about getting into nature. And so that was really my use case that I was trying to solve for.
Awesome. This might have dovetailed right into the last question of what is your favorite vacation spot? I don't know, maybe you're hiking in the woods or something like that is your vacation.
Pretty much. Yeah. I would say backpacking in the Sierras is probably, would probably be up there. Yeah.
Got it. Awesome. Yeah. Well, Ezra, man, this has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate your time. If people want to learn about what you're doing, connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, our website is upshiftcars.com. You can also find us at that handle across all social at upshiftcars. So Twitter or X, Facebook and Instagram. And then I probably most active on LinkedIn, to be perfectly honest. That's where I usually post my latest thoughts or articles or thought pieces are usually there.
Very cool. We'll put all that stuff in the show notes. Ezra, again, man, thank you for the time. I really appreciate it. It was great to connect with you.
Great. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
I hope you found at least one actionable insight from this episode of the Growth Capital Podcast, your one-stop shop for insights from private equity leaders, CEOs, and startup entrepreneurs on starting, investing in, and scaling successful businesses, as well as the role having the right talent plays in growing a successful business. It would be greatly appreciated if you would rate and review this podcast. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe and drop us a comment so we can expand the audience of this podcast. Thank you for all your support, and don't forget about upcoming episodes dropping every Tuesday.